This is Talk It Out, the Women's Agenda podcast. Tune in for your weekly download on the latest news, trends and ideas affecting your career or your business. Here's your host, Angela Priestley.
Hello and welcome to the Women's Agenda podcast. Something a little bit different today from our usual show, in which I usually have Georgie Dent in the studio with me, plus another guest, and we talk about the week's stories, some of the big stories about women and work that we write about on Women's Agenda. So today I wanted to share with you an interview that I did with Cyan, the co-founder of Envato, an online marketplace that's seen Cyan sort of move up the young rich list, and it's really become one of Australia's most celebrated startups. Started in 2006 in Cyan's parents' garage. It's an amazing story. But more recently, she launched a chocolate startup called Hey Tiger, so an ethical chocolate business that's really marketed and targeted at women. And if you've seen it on Instagram, you'll see it's pretty cool. It has loads of really great colours and branding. I believe it's mostly vegan, if not all vegan, and I have tried it and I can tell you it does taste delicious. So I did this interview a couple of months back. We talked about the bit of a tech detox that Cyan went on after an eye injury. We talk about travel, different ways she works, how she manages a 4 and a 7-year-old with all the things that she's got going on. So loads of stuff on time management, how she's learnt to work efficiently and effectively, a little bit on automation and the future of work, and why she would move from a really successful startup to go and launch another one, why you'd want to go through that in the first place, and also why she was inspired to launch a social enterprise. It's a really fun chat, so we'll listen to that now. Okay, well, thank you for having me in the Melbourne office here, Cyan. So I know that you famously started your business while you were travelling back in 2006. I wanted to start by asking if you still get the opportunity to travel, and maybe what your last trip was, and if you take your work with you still.
Way less. I have a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old now, and as anybody with kids knows, once school starts, your flexibility for travel tends to decrease, but we still really do try and get away. The last big trip that I took work with me, but it was an amazing trip, was going around the States and looking at food trends coming out of the States, which was just really fun, just spending 3 weeks wandering around and seeing what was being done with food, in particular chocolate. But most recently, my husband and I and our kids went to Chile with my parents, which I have to say I thought was ambitious. My husband really wanted to go, and I was thinking, this is South America when neither of you speak Spanish, is an ambitious trip to do.
Yeah, with the kids as well.
Yeah.
So very ambitious.
Yeah.
But you took the parents, so that helps.
Took my parents, who had a great time. But no, it was fantastic. And yes, actually did manage to leave work completely at home, which was a wonderful thing.
Okay, so what does a work week currently look like for you now? I think when we last spoke, I know you were sort of working 4 days a week. You had an 18-month-old then. Obviously, it's a couple of years later now. I don't want to say part-time, full-time, but how do you work Monday to Friday? Do you have set hours? Do you try and leave at a given time each day?
I work full-time now. I do school drop-off every morning. So this year we've had a bit of a shift in that both my children are now going to the same school. One's in a kinder program and the other one's at grade 1. So I get to do one drop-off every day, which is amazing. We live 5 minutes from the school. So 5 minutes walk. So I just walk them over and then and I get on the train and I go to work. So I do that 5 days a week. There's 1 day a week when I come home and do school pickup, and the rest of the week I get home before 6. I try really, really hard to get home before 6. I wouldn't say this is the forever level of work that I will be doing, but because it's really, really hectic running a new startup, I just need to be there a lot more.
Yeah, yeah. And you are in launch mode with Hey Tiger, which I want to get to in a moment. But I'm keen to ask about productivity and flexibility and how you stay really effective with your time, because obviously you have been. We're sharing a microphone, so let me just hold this for you instead of you having to stick it in my face. So I guess, so looking at productivity, I just, first of all, if you could take me back to when you were building the company and as your first startup, I guess. So I know that you've done different things beforehand, but as your first startup of such significant scale, like how many hours were you working a day while you were travelling? How did you ensure that you were spending that time being effective, especially when you would have been in places where Wi-Fi wasn't so great? How did you sit down and make sure that you're maximising that effort?
Well, this was 13 years ago now. So, yes, there were a lot of places where Wi-Fi wasn't that great. We ended up spending a ridiculously large amount of time sitting in Starbucks. Yeah. So all over the world, Starbucks was our friend. And the first question, if we were going to stay anywhere, like this was before Airbnb, so the first question you would ask if you were going to rent a place to stay was, how's the Wi-Fi? Because it was incredibly important.
Still a very important question.
Yes.
So, yep, still an essential requirement.
Yes.
Yeah.
Look, we ended up working really, really long hours, and I think I did not work very efficiently at that time. I honestly think having children really trained me to work far more efficiently than I ever did before. So to give you some context, 2 months before our first child was born, we were in an apartment which was a 5-minute walk from our work. We literally just had a mattress on the floor, a TV, a couch, and a turned over milk crate as a coffee table, and that was it. There was no other sort of indication that we were functioning adults aside from our business. And it really was having children that made us go, okay, we've got to be a little bit more efficient about this. We've got to work smart rather than just working hard. This can't be an all-consuming thing anymore. This has to be something which is balanced with caring and being present for our kids. So I think that was good training to help us kind of wrap our heads around this work smart, maximising impact type of philosophy.
Yeah. And I sense that maybe you had a little bit of it beforehand, because I'm just reading some of your early work and early opinions on some of these things. But once you had kids, and I like that you're saying we, it wasn't just you. So it's obviously it was a family decision. What were some of the strategies that you started working on to try and get more out of your time? And I mean, how quickly did you start doing it? Was it kind of as soon as you were having babies, or was it sort of 6 months in and you thought, oh, where are the hours going to come from, as I did? So,
I think naturally when I was, at the late stages of pregnancy, you slow down, which is helpful. I think it was much more of a sort of a crash landing for Collis, my husband, because you don't sort of, I think, potentially when you are the partner who is not physically creating and birthing the child, it's harder to understand the magnitude of the change a first child brings until it's actually happening and you realise. So while I can't speak for him, I think there was a much more dramatic, I would say violent transition than for me, who I think started to sort of expect a lot earlier, oh wow, this is going to be a big deal, I've really got to be sort of intelligent about this. So I think that, I actually spent some time thinking, all right, well, how many hours realistically will I have in a week? How many hours realistically do I want to spend working? How many hours do I want to spend with my children, just being present? So, and then thinking, all right, well, given I maybe work, I don't even know how many hours, but way more than 40 hours per week, at this point, how do I move that back? How do I scale that back? And that, really meant hiring more people. So, I ended up hiring an assistant who started taking care of my calendar, started sort of helping me be more strategic about how I was spending my time. Could be bad cop a little bit, could be say, okay, do we really need an hour for this meeting? Can we do it in half an hour? Which was great because I don't like asking those questions. It makes me feel uncomfortable and like I'm not nice and I'm not here, and that their time is not is sort of potentially being undervalued. So having somebody like that who, it sounds weird, but she kind of trained me to really be thinking, because she needed to schedule in my calendar about, all right, well, when are you going to do all these things? And working through that formally was a helpful process.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And sometimes you need somebody, I mean, I imagine she had experience doing this previously as well, and you just need somebody with that personality and also with the experience to be able to do that, to be able to cut those meetings down, to be able to even say no to things if it's not going to be of value as well. And there's much you can learn from those people as well.
Yeah, I think so. She had a lot more of a, okay, well, how does this affect the bottom line? Not the bottom line financially, but the bottom line around sort of, I guess, my performance as a human on a holistic level, which was a really interesting way to think about it. And it kind of, I think because she was there, it almost forced me to do it, because otherwise I don't know that I would have, because it does involve making some tough choices. I also, one of the pivotal things for me, which I found really interesting, was I read a book. I don't know what your position is on swearing, but it's the life-changing magic of not giving a...
Oh, no, I read the life-changing magic of not giving a fuck as well. So.
Yes, great, okay. I was like, we didn't discuss the swearing prior to the podcast starting. But that was an incredible book for me, just this concept that you only have so many fucks to give in your day. What are you going to give them to?
We were just talking about the life-changing magic of not giving a fuck, and we've only got so many fucks to give. So what was the lesson in that for you?
I think I realised that I was spending a lot of time prioritising what other people needed as opposed to what I needed, which is not a bad thing. It sounds really cold to say that you shouldn't prioritise other people, but I think prioritising other people where it is impactful is really important. And I had to get a lot better at being transparent and going, I love you, I really want to see you, I would really love to do this, I just don't have the time, the space. If I do this, I literally won't be able to see my kids as much as I need to see my kids this week, so I'm sorry, I can't do it.
Or you won't be able to sleep or other valuable things. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. There's something that is really, really important to me is going to sort of fall over if I do this thing. So it was interesting because I know last time we spoke, I think I said something around if an opportunity comes up and it, and I can do it, I'll try and do it, which was a really, really useful thing for me at that time. It was a useful tool for me to get my head out of out of imposter syndrome into sort of trying to assist and be impactful, considering there was a lack of women representing the sort of the space that I'm in technology. But I also reached a point where I thought, okay, I've really got to be considering the impact of these things as well.
And I might just say to that, because I remember this conversation, and I know that I've been there as well. It's you want to say yes to as many things, and it is really great careers advice, but you also at some point need to learn to say no. And there is this transition point, I think, for women, particularly if you have kids and when your kids are young. That magic of being able to say no is incredibly vital and important for your own well-being, particularly, and also just for doing things well. But I mean, I know that in that period when you did say yes to a lot of things, and I think that work showed, and we did see you out there in the media a lot more, and we saw you speaking at things a lot more, and I feel like we really know you as part of this company and what you've achieved, and as a woman in tech who that other women can look to. So I think it's important that you were able to do that, and of course it's okay to now be saying no.
Yes, look, it was a wonderful thing to do, and it was a period where I think I learned a lot about myself because I pushed myself really hard. And honestly, still, if there is an opportunity that I think, wow, this is going to be really impactful, but it's hard for me to achieve, I'll still try and sort of prioritize it, and I'll still try and do it. It's just more a matter of not just... I think my default setting was if somebody needs something, I will say yes, which after a while I realised, okay, if I do have only so many fucks to give in a day, that means there's all these other things that I really care about that I just can't do. I can't be a part of, I can't be present for. And when you're trying to also achieve big things at work, you do need to consider the impact of how you spend your time.
Yeah, exactly. And for me, I often think it's also the impact of how if I might disappoint that person later on, because because I'm not brave enough to say no now, if I might end up disappointing them because I'm not able to give my all in later on. And I know that I've done that many times before. And I'm not pointing the microphone at you, dear, if you've done this yourself.
No,
but I think we've all been there in different ways.
Yes.
So I'd love to ask you about, now this is going to basics, but I've seen you write about to-do lists.
Yes.
Do you write a to-do list? Is that how you plan your day?
I have a rolling to-do list. At the end of every day, I will write a list of everything that's basically, that I need to get done. So I have a Trello board, which has all my sort of the big ticket items. And then, of course, there's all the stuff that comes up in any given day. Again, with a startup, there's sort of curveballs every day that you've got to deal with, things you suddenly think, geez, somebody needs to do this, I better get it done. So there's a to-do list at the end of each day where I put all that stuff down so that I know it's somewhere and I can leave it. And then occasionally I'm also sending myself emails on the way home, on the train, going, oh, by the way, don't forget this, don't forget this, don't forget this. But I know it's there. So that way, hopefully, the ideal scenario is that then that travel home is a time for me to disengage a bit from work, and then I get home and I'm present in my home life, phone's away, I'm, engaged there.
Yeah.
Following morning, the goal is, and the reason I say goal is because, look, realistically it doesn't always happen, but when things run really smoothly the way I want them to, I have at least a half-hour window in the morning. I've got all those things that I know I need to do, and I'm in a really clear headspace to prioritise. So what are the things which are going to get me closer to sort of to the big goals I want to hit? And I'll often sort of structure it around if there's something that's going to take some mental heavy lifting where I need to be focused for it and present, and it will take a large amount of time, I will try and do that in the morning. And I'll try and go somewhere quiet where I'm not going to be distracted in order to do that piece of work. And then I head back into the tumult of the office, and I do the rest of my work throughout the day, but sort of, there's just this distraction that happens in that space, and that is fine.
Yeah, so get the deep work kind of out of the way in the morning. And would that be for like 2 hours or so, or how long would you do that in the office or go to a cafe or at home? Or
my ideal scenario is to go to a cafe. I think it's great. I can have a nice coffee. I can sit down. I've got time to be present. I've pulled myself out of the sort of the people around me going, oh, by the way, have you thought about this? What's happening about this? It's sort of because things are running, particularly right now, very, very fast. I think if you're out of that space, it's a lot easier. Like, for instance, this morning, I think, you walked into our office space and it smells slightly of sewerage in here. I walked in this morning and I had 3 people saying to me, does it smell like sewage outside? What should we do about the sewerage? And which is
not
fine.
Something you intended on coming up today, I imagine. So it's not on your to-do list.
No, not on my to-do list, but it's if I'm not here, they'll figure out what to do with the sewerage. If I'm here, of course they'll. There's no sewerage around our office. There's just a mild seweragey odour. But random stuff, just comes up all the time, and I think you need to remove yourself from it. Otherwise, it's very easy to be super busy all day long, but not actually get anything done, which is really meaningful and propelling you towards your goal. Yeah,
I think that deep work scheduling, I'm calling it deep work because have you read Cal Newport's book? He wrote a book, Deep Work, talking about how we need to schedule this work. He also recommends that we all get off social media. So I'm not quite there with you, Cal, but I take your point about the deep work, which is, really finding a way to build it into your day, to figure out how many hours you can cope with a day, because we can't all do 6 hours worth of that. Maybe you can only do 90 minutes, maybe you can do 2 hours, and to find when you're really productive and when you'll get the most out of that period and what kind of environment you should be in to do it. And cafes are great. You can also get little apps that replicate cafe sounds if that helps you.
This is a commercial break for Work It Out. We'll be back in a moment. But if you're interested in being a sponsor for Work It Out or Women's Agenda, just drop us a line and let us know. That's womensagenda.com.au.
So I need to ask, because I saw this come up on your Instagram profile, and I'm going to forget the name of the app now, but it is one that reminds you 5 times a day that you are going to die.
Yes.
Which comes from, because I know, and we've spoken about this previously, when you got very ill after the birth of your second child, and it was a bit of a, I don't know, not necessarily a wake-up call, but just, I guess, enlighten you in some way. But maybe take me through what inspired you to get that app. And are you still using it? How is it helping, and what does it do for you?
I think it's an interesting thing. I tend to sort of do these little experiments just to sort of hack and see what will help me be a more productive, happier human. I think probably a lot of us do. And that was one of them that I decided to share also, because 5 times a day on my phone is a thing that says, by the way, you're going to die. And sometimes people look at my phone and go, what's going on there? So I shared this on Instagram, and it did get a lot of people, understandably, asking questions about it. I read an article, which was a really interesting article about often we try really hard not to think about things which are going to really, truly challenge us, really sort of make us uncomfortable, and it gives them more power than they'd probably otherwise have. I do think that after I had a blood clot in my lung, as you mentioned, after my second was born, and it was touch and go for a while, and it really did make me, in hindsight, I view it as a bit of a blessing, because it did 2 things for me. One, it made me realise that life can be really short. You literally have no idea what's coming up, so you've really got to appreciate what you've got right now, and 2, really maximise your time. Really sort of, if there's stuff you want to do, you can't really hold off. You need to do it now, because the future is so uncertain. The second thing was, it gave me a great sense of perspective about the importance, the relative importance of my work life. So, as we've discussed before, I have a big thing around imposter syndrome, much less now these days, and I credit that experience with being a bit of a wake-up call of who actually cares, actually cares what other people think. It's about sort of, if you really want to try to do something, then just go and try and do it. In the relative scheme of things, it's not life and death. It doesn't actually matter. Nobody that you care about is unsafe by you doing the thing which you feel really challenged by. That sort of, I guess, that event in my life, that sort of, that touch and go period was so monumental in my thinking that I feel like that app in a way is hanging on to that feeling. It's hanging on to that sense of, my goodness, there's a potential scarcity of time, and now's the moment. None of this is life and death. Just have fun. Really, it's a stressful period right now. I'm way more stressed than I would normally be, just because we're leading up to launch, and it's intense, and there's all these sort of little teething issues and things running, out of time, and we're spending a lot of money, and it's a big gamble. But that reminder that it doesn't matter. It matters, but actually at its core, it doesn't matter. It doesn't define who you are. Nobody's going to get hurt. It's literally just sort of, your work life that you're kind of, that you're challenging yourself in some ways is a helpful thing to remember.
Yeah, I like it in the sense that it reminds you also about mortality, but also that we're so lucky to be here in the first place. We only get so many days. We only get so many days when it comes to your work and your career and the things that you can get out of that as well. So I want to move on to Hey Tiger, which is exciting, where you're about to launch. When you're running a really busy company in the first place, what sort of inspired, like, why go and do something on the side? And how did you actually, I'm sorry, I shouldn't even say I don't even know if it's on the side. You might be doing this full time now. How did you find the space in your existing work and life to pursue Hey Tiger? And also, I imagine part of finding that space may also lead into why you decided to start it as well, which would be great to hear, and some of the background behind starting a chocolate company.
So I'd been working on and within Envato for 12 years, and it's been, immensely satisfying. It's been wonderful. I obviously, understandably, absolutely, love this company. It's very, very personal to me. I actually got an eye injury. And I, nothing super dramatic, but I literally couldn't look at my phone. I couldn't look at my computer. I had to completely pull out of my day-to-day existence, and which was great because suddenly I had this period of time where I felt fine. Usually if you're sick, you're kind of preoccupied with being sick. I literally just couldn't do the usual stuff that I do. I had to take an enforced break from work and sort of be in a dark room a little bit more, and I was absolutely bored out of my brain. During that period of time, I didn't have any of that input that one usually has. Now, I have a theory that, in this period of time, with the technology that we have available to us, it is absolutely possible to spend every waking moment receiving input. And I think that periods of time where you don't have that is what really causes significant output. So really helps you think, really helps you sort of, make major decisions, make changes, solve, complex problems. So I'll try really hard when I'm on my way home on the train at the end of the day, or, if I'm walking, to not have any input, because there's always a podcast I could listen to. There's always sort of stuff that I, should be doing, but it's really important just to have that time where your mind can just wander. I think that's really, really useful. So I had a super dose of that. And during that period of time, I thought about what I'd been doing, and I realised that while I had done startup-esque things within Envato, frequently, launching new products, thinking about, those sorts of things, there was nothing that had really sort of been exactly like that Envato experience, that literally creating something from nothing and putting it out into the world, and it's yours and you've made it, and it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. And I realised I really want to do that again. And the second thing was, I think that I've been asked a lot about the future of work and about automation and about the role of business there's a lot of very intelligent people saying that we're going to experience major job loss in the next 15 years. So a lot of people are not going to have work. So of course I get asked about this on panels, and I need to come up with intelligent things to say about it. So I think about that a fair bit. And I think one of the conclusions that I came to is that if this is inevitable, it means that companies really need to take a bit more of a holistic approach about how they are engaging with communities, how they're supporting communities, how they're supporting the people that sort of, that work for them, that, use their product, that they exist within. And the logical conclusion to that was a social enterprise. I also met Daniel and Justine Flynn from Thank You, and immediately thought, after talking to them for 5 minutes, I was like, I want to be like you when I grow up, which is alarming because they're like a decade younger than me. So I had it in my mind that I really wanted to make a social enterprise. Finally, a couple of things happened in terms of the chocolate piece. So I've been obsessed with chocolate for a very long time, to the point of actually making chocolate.
It is the dream. I just, it's one of those little, those little back of my, maybe when I grow up,
Exactly.
I'll have my own little chocolate whatever and enjoy making it. But so you have been making it.
Yes, for quite a while, but never sort of put the pieces together. And then a couple of things happened. The first was I started supporting, there's an incredible organisation called the Hunger Project. I became one of their ambassadors, and in particular started learning about an epicentre that they have in Burkina Faso, which is the third poorest country in the world, bordered by Ghana and the Ivory Coast. 60 to 70% of the world's cocoa comes from Ghana and the Ivory Coast, and there's still major issues around child labour. And what I learnt was that one of the things that was happening is that children were being trafficked from Burkina Faso into the Ivory Coast and Ghana to work on cocoa plantations at a very young age. And it suddenly occurred to me that something that brings me and, every woman and man, but a lot of women that I know, a great deal of pleasure and enjoyment is responsible for a huge amount of pain and suffering to children my children's age and families who, are already in pretty dire straits. And the more I dove into it, the more I realised that you can't even blame the cocoa farmers living in Ghana and the Ivory Coast, because they themselves are living under the poverty line with no access to education and really, really dire circumstances themselves. And while the cocoa industry is working towards positive change, it is a slow and arduous process. And I thought, well, if I love chocolate and this industry is really balked and I want to do a social enterprise, what can I do here? At around about the same time, I did that 3-week trip around the States that I mentioned. And I still wasn't sure that it was going to be chocolate. I was thinking, maybe this isn't a realistic plan. And then I looked around, and there are these incredible chocolate companies in the States which actually cater to the women that are their target demographic. Like here in Australia, I don't know if you've noticed, but it's either European tradition, which kind of resonates probably with your parents-in-law, or it's kids. Like chocolate tends to sort of, go towards those two demographics, but it really doesn't kind of engage and excite women. There's always the same inclusions. Like, okay, well, this one has coconut, this one has hazelnuts. There's nothing really exciting. And chocolate's an incredible ingredient. Like, it pairs so beautifully with so many different things. It's such an exciting, experiential thing. So I thought, well, if this trend is happening in the States, and generally it takes a couple of years for food trends to arrive in Australia, why don't I have a go at doing this myself and make it a social enterprise under the hood? So we started working on Hey Tiger. Literally, I started by making chocolate with, the way I thought that it should be made in my kitchen and taking it into the Envato office, not telling anybody that I'd made it myself, and doing weird little focus groups, like literally saying to people, hey, at lunchtime, do you want to come in and just try some chocolate and see what you think? And matching... like we basically got 3 or 4 different competitors' chocolates and my chocolate, and I say we because a couple of people helped me, which was very nice of them, very supportive of them, and just said, okay, what do you think? Do you find this exciting? Do you find these flavour profiles exciting? And the first one I did was a lychee and fresh mint white chocolate. That was my very first, and I got so much excitement and enthusiasm about that one and some other flavours that we did, that I thought, I actually think that this can work, and we've created sort of a brand around it, which is, celebratory, cool. We took that, Emily Weiss from Glossier said she wanted to create a brand that you'd happily wear on your T-shirt. We've really tried to do that with Hey Tiger. We've tried to make it a brand that is aspirational and exciting. Because, if alcohol brands do it all the time, why can't a chocolate brand? It's focused very heavily on, millennial women to women probably to their sort of, late 30s is probably our sweet spot. And yeah, we're a week away from launch now. So it's very exciting.
Which is amazing. And it's I've actually never thought about the fact that chocolate and the way it's packaged and positioned, it actually isn't that appealing to women. It's just the way it is, almost. It's always been that way. So therefore, let's keep creating it and producing it that way. And you're right, it appeals to either kids or it appeals to, it's kind of got that old time to your grandparents almost.
Yes.
I've been looking at all the images and the videos that you've been sharing online, and it looks incredible. And you've got the chocolate being broken in half, and it just makes you want to dive in there and eat it. So I can't wait to try it. I just wanted to ask you finally, because we have been talking a lot about time. How do you manage that? Are you doing this? Obviously, you're in the startup mode now. Yes. So I imagine a lot of your energy and focus is going into that. But did you have to let go of some of the responsibilities that you were doing with Envato?
Yes. I've transitioned out of an operational role at Envato, which honestly took about 6 months to do properly. I still try and come in one day every week just to be here, but I'm not here day to day anymore for the first time in 13 years. So that is really, it's been a really interesting transition, and I think it's been a transition. I think, look, the whole team is so excited and so supportive about Hey Tiger that it's a wonderful thing on that end. But I must say, I mostly miss working with the people. Like, I've got an amazing Hey Tiger team and I adore them, but every time I come into this office, the work has always been really interesting, but the people is what I is who I miss. But, I'm still on the board. I still come in and I, still do a few really key bits and pieces. But yes, 90% of my time is now Hey Tiger.
Okay, so we've mentioned a few books throughout the conversation, but I just wanted to finish to see if there were any other books. I believe you are an avid reader and obviously podcast listener, and anything that you'd recommend Women's Agenda readers.
I think that, so one of the things that I tend to do if I'm feeling a little bit flat is listen to a Robin Sharma podcast in the morning. He wrote The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari, and he is self-helpy. On the other hand, if you are looking for a way to ramp yourself up just 10 minutes, listen to something which is almost like a life coach saying you can do it, then I highly recommend his podcasts. Again, as I mentioned, that book, The Life-Changing Magic of Not Giving a Fuck, was really pivotal to me. Literally going through and writing down everything that I have and going, okay, what can I cull? What can I optimize is a really, useful thing. I'm also a big fan of Tim Ferriss. I tend to sort of... there's a whole bunch of more practical books that I read, but they get really specific and probably not as sort of as relevant. But I think in terms of I'm a real sucker for the motivational read, because I do sometimes, if you're doing big stuff, it all can feel a little bit overwhelming at times, and almost just having that time out, even if it's 15 minutes, just to go, all right, I'm going to refocus and reframe my thinking, is really, really useful. So I'm a sucker for the Tim Ferrisses and the Robin Sharmas of the world.
Yeah, reading and hearing about other people doing big, interesting things can help a lot. So,
yes.
So if people want to buy Hey Tiger chocolate or check it out or have a look, where do they go to?
From the 7th of March, it'll be at heytiger.com.au. If they stay at Jackalope Hotel in Mornington, we are the official chocolate of their minibar, so you can go enjoy it there. It's a fabulous hotel.
Down there. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, like in end of March that's happening, which is really, really exciting for us. It's a fantastic brand to be a part of. But yeah, I think primarily online. We are focusing heavily on online gifting, so same day, next day delivery, free handwritten card, and really beautiful collections of chocolate and fabulous packaging. And it's, in my humble opinion, really, really delicious chocolate that we're not really seeing in Australia right now.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, and I cannot wait to just dive into and eat a whole load of that chocolate, kilos of that chocolate. So, and to try, I'll be thinking of you every time as well, and you sampling different flavours in your kitchen, which is wonderful. So thank you very much.